December 29th, 2025. It is 3:42 in the morning. Deep within the ancient pine forests of the Novgorod region, a thick layer of frost covers the silent taiga. This is not just any woodland, this is a fortress of secrecy. This is the Valdai residence, the inner sanctum of the Russian Federation, and the place where the world's most guarded man seeks his ultimate refuge. Protected by the elite Federal Protective Service, and a dome of electronic warfare so powerful it can blind the most advanced satellites in orbit, Valdai is designed to be the safest place on the planet. But on this freezing Tuesday morning, the historic silence of these woods was not just broken. It was completely vaporized. 91 drones. That is the official number the Kremlin would later scream to the international press in a state of visible panic. 91 long-range suicide UAVs, their wings stenciled with the dark blue Ukrainian trident, were reportedly screaming through the night sky with their hardened GPS coordinates locked onto a single specific target, the private residence and the luxury guest houses of Vladimir Putin. While the headlines of the world remained fixated on the brutal static trench warfare of the Donbass, the war had just taken a massive 3,000-kilometer leap into the lion's den. This was a direct strike at the heart of the regime. This event should have been physically impossible given the dense layers of Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft systems and the massive jamming towers surrounding the estate. But as the oily black smoke cleared over the frozen, white surface of Lake Valdai, the world was left with a terrifying riddle. Was this the ultimate decapitation strike, the moment Ukraine decided to end the conflict with a single decisive blow? Or were we witnessing the most dangerous false flag operation in human history, a meticulously choreographed piece of theater designed to manipulate a new American president and push the global community to the edge of a nuclear precipice? To understand how we reached this volatile moment, we have to look back at the dramatic shifts in the winter of 2026. By this time, the traditional geography of the war had completely dissolved into something much more fluid and global. Ukraine was no longer fighting a purely defensive battle within its own borders. They had developed what military intelligence analysts began calling the long arm. At the World Economic Forum in Davos just weeks prior, President Zelensky had delivered a speech that sent shivers through the Russian Admiralty. He declared that no Russian asset, no matter how far from the front lines or how deep in the frozen north, was safe anymore. He specifically mentioned the possibility of hunting Russian warships as far away as the cold, jagged coast of Greenland. It sounded like hyperbole at the time, a desperate leader trying to project strength to secure more funding. But the technology appearing on the ground suggested a much darker reality for the Kremlin. Ukraine had moved from importing simple drones to becoming a global powerhouse in autonomous long-range strike systems. Their flagship weapon, the An-196 Lyuty, had evolved into a masterpiece of low-cost engineering. It was no longer a simple flying bomb made of plastic. It was a sophisticated carbon fiber ghost constructed from materials that absorbed radar waves rather than reflecting them. It utilized a unique combination of AI-driven terrain mapping and encrypted satellite links, allowing it to navigate flawlessly, even when its primary GPS signal was completely jammed by Russian electronic warfare. These drones were being produced by the thousands in hidden underground factories. They were the backbone of what the GUR, Ukraine's military intelligence service, called the Ghost Fleet. The Russian Ministry of Defense described the mechanics of the Valdai attack as a sophisticated saturation strike. They claimed the drones did not come from the south, where the Russian air defense network is most dense and prepared. Instead, they performed a massive silent flanking maneuver. They launched from secret locations, perhaps even from within Russian territory itself, and looped around the major urban centers. They skimmed just 20 meters above the treetops of the Smolensk forests, hiding in the deep radar shadows of the rolling hills. This is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any air defense commander. When you have 91 targets approaching from multiple vectors simultaneously, the computer systems cannot prioritize effectively. The Pantsir batteries at Valdai were forced to engage everything at once in a frantic attempt to save the residents. Tracer fire lit up the clouds like a macabre firework display, and the sound of anti-aircraft cannons echoed for miles. But while the defenders were busy swatting down the cheap decoys, the heavy payload killers were supposedly slipping through the gaps in the perimeter. The timing of this chaos was not a coincidence. It occurred exactly during a high-stakes telephone conversation between Vladimir Putin and the President of the United States. As the sounds of explosions echoed in the background of the call, Putin reportedly told his American counterpart that his private home was under direct attack by Western-supplied weapons. The political fallout was instantaneous. In Mar-a-Lago, the atmosphere was one of extreme fury. It appeared that Ukraine had just sabotaged the most promising peace negotiations in years. For 48 critical hours, the entire international support framework for Kyiv hung by a single, fraying thread as the world waited for a response. But then, the narrative began to crack under the weight of its own inconsistencies. On January 2nd, the GRU, Russia's foreign intelligence agency, decided to double down on its proof to convince the skeptics. They held a televised press conference showing what they claimed was the intact black box from one of the downed Ukrainian drones. They alleged that the recovered flight logs proved the drones had been launched from a site near Sumy and were programmed to strike the exact guest house where Putin was staying. They handed this digital data over to Western intelligence agencies, expecting it to be the final nail in the coffin for Ukrainian military aid. But they made a fatal mistake. They deeply underestimated the forensic capabilities of the NSA and the CIA. When American analysts plugged the raw data into their advanced simulation models, the physics did not add up. The fuel consumption rates, wind resistance variables, and radio frequency signatures recorded in the logs did not match those of a drone flying from the Ukrainian border. Instead, the digital footprints pointed to a much closer launch site. Some of the drones appeared to have originated in the Leningrad region, just a few hours away from Valdai. The attack was not a Ukrainian strike at all. It was a Russian fabrication. It was a digital and physical forgery. A theatrical performance where Russia launched its own drones over a remote forest to create the illusion of an assassination attempt. However, the true story is even more incredible than the lie. While the Russian military was busy orchestrating this fake attack to win a diplomatic advantage, the real Ukrainian GUR was watching every move. They knew about the Russian false flag plan through their own deep cover informants. They decided to use the Russian distraction as a golden opportunity for a real blow. While every Russian radar operator in the northwest was focused on the scripted drama at Valdai, a real Ukrainian operation was unfolding in the freezing dark waters of the North Sea. A civilian-looking trawler, acting as a covert mothership, had quietly deployed a new generation of stealth sea drones. These drones did not target a guest house or a civilian building. They targeted the eyes and ears of the Russian North Fleet. They struck a high-value SIGINT vessel monitoring NATO communications in the Arctic. The vessel was turned off in a surgical strike that Russia could not even report, without admitting its own embarrassing vulnerability. The Valdai false flag had backfired in the most humiliating way possible. Putin had created a massive smokescreen to lie to the world, and Ukraine had used that very smoke to strike a blow that was far more damaging than any drone hitting a chimney. We have entered a new age of high-stakes shadow warfare, where the line between a headline and a lie is thinner than ever before. The events of early 2026 show us that the war is no longer about territory alone. It is about manipulating reality itself. Putin's fear has driven him to turn his own palaces into propaganda sets, while Ukraine's ingenuity has turned the entire globe into a potential battlefield. As the ice continues to drift in the Arctic and the drones continue to hum over the taiga, one thing is certain: there are no safe zones left. The front line is everywhere, and the next deep dive might be even closer to home than anyone dares to imagine. Write your tactical analysis in the comments. We'll see you in the next deep dive. Stay sharp.